Hey guys and gals, Jack here with Miyagi Morning's episode. I don't have any idea. It'll say in the title what number it is. It's 60 something. See, it's Wednesday, so it should be 68, I think. Anyway, I have a great question in from Miyagi, and it stemmed from a video that I did about the Texas blackout and some things that we learned and some things that we did, and really had nothing to do with anything we learned. We already knew this, but it was all about having a great, delicious, I don't know if you can see that, there's steaming hot cup of coffee during the blackout. And I made a comment in that video about how a long time ago I had a guy I worked for, and he had like a small generator. I think it was like an EU 2000 Honda. And, powers out, we'll make some coffee. And it was barely able to run a standard drip coffee maker. Yeah. These coffee makers will draw somewhere between 1,100 and 1,500 watts. So a generator of that class can run one, but what it can't do is run it in anything else. And a lot of people are sitting out there, you've got your little 800 or 1,000 watt, like Dirty Hand Tools or Sportsman's generator, and they're a great little backup. I'm always an advocate of getting a bigger generator later, but I'm also an advocate of let's not use generators for things that they're not really good for. And generators are really not the best way to make water and ground coffee into coffee. Now, before we even start on basically the setup, I want to set the frame with two things. Number one, I'm a whole bean, grind it right before I make it kind of guy. I might grind enough coffee for a couple days at a time occasionally, but generally I'm grinding coffee on a daily basis with a little bitty coffee grinder that I'll put a link to in the video notes. It's made by Mr. Coffee. It's cheap and it works. It uses electricity. Yeah, it uses electricity. So if you're going to be doing that, you're going to need some form of backup power. The good news is it doesn't need much power at all to run it. And I don't know why, like, somebody like DeWalt or something with this huge installed tool base should make a coffee grinder that uses like 20 volt DeWalt battery. It would just be badass, and it would be cool. It'd be neat on a job site. And you're going to see how on a job site you have everything you need to make coffee if you're prepared. So the other side of what I try to teach is that what you use in a disaster should be when possible and when optimum, as close to what you do on a daily basis outside of a disaster. That way you're familiar with it, you're used to it, everything works. So this little prop here is a great French press. And this is my number one recommendation for making coffee, to make great coffee in your home on a daily basis. And the beauty of it is as long as you can boil water and have ground coffee, you can make as much coffee as you want. This is the smaller model. Again, I'll put a link to where you can get these in the video notes as well. I have these on my website, full review on them. This is the smaller model. I have a larger model. And day to day, I make my coffee with this, or my wife makes our coffee with this, depending on whose turn it is to make the coffee. Really, really simple thing. You fill it up with as much coffee and you figure out what works for you. You then pour hot water in. I'm not a boiling kind of guy unless I'm just getting by because the power's out or whatever, and hey, it boiled, so the hell it goes in there. I usually heat my water to make coffee with using an electric kettle to exactly 200 degrees. That's day to day. In a disaster, I throw it on the stove and I boil it. We'll get to that in a second. But once you have that coffee in here, you let it set for about 5 minutes. You insert the plunger, and then you slowly, not rapidly, push the plunger down. Yeah, that's it. Then we have delicious coffee. To me, this makes coffee that is so superior to a drip coffee maker. I don't own one anymore. I got rid of them. And if you are going to get a drip coffee maker despite all this, then I recommend that you get one that has a carafe that does not have a hot plate. So it's not sitting there boiling and cooking down coffee. So basically, Mr. Coffee makes one. I'll see if I can find it and put that in the notes too for you. You slide it in, it drips, and then it has a little thing that automatically closes, and it keeps the coffee hot for a couple hours because it's so well insulated, but there's no additional heat. So if you insist, then that's what I would do. The other product that you can get, and I don't have any specific one to recommend because they're pretty much all about the same, is what's called a percolator. Now, coffee snobs hate these, and they hate these because it boils coffee. The way they work is pretty simple. In a lot of ways, they work like the large break room style electric coffee makers. If you look at that, it looks just like what goes in one of those guys, right? You've got a basket up here, you fill it with coffee, you put your little lid on it, you put it into your coffee maker, and you want to hold it like this when you do it, you end up with coffee going all into your water, and that's not good. And then you take this, and you put this on any sort of a heat source with it closed. All right, you want it closed, and it basically is going to percolate. And you kind of know when it's done, but there's no real like, hey, I'm done. You kind of figure that out as you go. And if you use it too early, you'll have really weak coffee, and you'll figure out about a time frame that works for you with the percolation. And what it's doing is just very simple. It's heating water. That water is coming up through this tube, through its own force. It's being discharged into the basket and draining back through the holes. It's real simple. So you've got the water coming out of the little thing here. It's percolating. Poop, poop. Some of them are really cool. My grandfather had a very old one that he made his coffee with all the time on a coal stove in the wintertime. So the coal stove ran nonstop through winter to keep the house warm. Was like half side was gas and half side was coal. And he just set this on his coal stove and it worked great. I have one of these for camping. I think this is way superior than dragging a French press camping. And when we're camping and we have a fire, we pull some coals out kind of off the side of the fire, set it directly on the coals, makes delicious coffee as far as I'm concerned. It is not, to me anyway, the same quality that you get from a French press. I do agree that boiling coffee is not optimum, but it's, you know what, if it's a blackout, you're much better off with that than you are with no coffee at all, or having your generator go whoa, or having to unplug things so you can run a coffee maker on a larger generator. In my opinion, do the easy thing. All you need to be able to do is boil water. There's lots of ways to do that. One more before we go on to boiling the water. There are these coffee makers. They're called stovetop espresso makers. Yeah, they make something espresso-like. And if you like really strong espresso style coffee, they're great. They kind of work like a percolator, except the coffee goes in the bottom. And they force the water up through the bottom under pressure, which is kind of how you make espresso. And they basically move the water from the bottom to the top. I guess if to my recollection, so I've never used one. I have a friend named Patrick Rohrman of MT Knives. He loves those things. He travels with one. If you like espresso, really strong style coffee, you'll like it. I'll just say, you can get little bitty ones that make like a single shot, and you can get bigger ones that make a cup. I'm not a huge espresso guy. It's kind of a guilty pleasure once in a while at like a coffee shop somewhere where I'm going to spend some time, and you start off with an espresso and switch to a regular coffee, like, and just kind of key things up. But if you like it, that would be a good way to go too. On grinding, my advice is, if you know a weather event's coming in that's going to put your power out, preemptively do as much as you can before it happens. And coffee ground is fine in emergencies for at least a week. So I would grind, enough, how much coffee you use every day. I would grind enough to go about 7 days and set it aside. And, maybe toward the end of it, it's not quite as optimum as that fresh ground, but it's fine. And then it's one less thing you have to do. So when you are expecting storms, a weather event, a hurricane, anything that might take out power for a day or more, if there's something easy to do while the power's on, go ahead and do it. Now, boiling water. This is only a problem for people that have electric stoves. The problem for America as a whole, as coffee addicts, is most of us have electric stoves. I don't. I will never own an electric stove again. No matter where, if I ever move from this place, which I think you're going to have to blast me out of here with dynamite now, but if I ever move from this place, then what I'm going to do is, if there is not gas service there, I will pay to have a propane pig installed, because it does so much of a better job day to day, and it is bulletproof when the power goes out. It doesn't matter. You might have to manually light your stove. So this is something I didn't even know that anybody would need to be told, because preppers should have matches and lighters. But I did talk to one person who had a gas stove, but found out in the middle of the blackout, at least couldn't find any in the house matches or lighters. And what this person did, they did have candles, so they went outside, they lit up their grill with their battery powered igniter, and then they used a stick to light a candle and brought the candle in the house, and then they would use like a paper straw to light the grill off the stove top. So make sure you have that. But if you have a gas stove, and as long as you know how to light it when the power's out, because your little plug-in zap 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 thing doesn't work, you're gold. If you don't, a lot of people think I'll go boil water on the grill. Yeah, that takes if it's just a standard grill without a side burner, that takes a long time. You might want it, and anything you're going to rely on, try it before you need it. A lot of grills do have side burners. Some grills have really great high BTU side burners. Some grills' side burners are fine for like warming up some basting sauce or something, but they're really not good for boiling significant amounts of water. If you get yourself one like a jet boil or something like that, you have it for backpacking, just know where it is, get it out in advance if you know some weather's coming in, and use that. I have a 2-burner Camp Chef stove. I'll put a link in the video notes. I love it. I love it. If I had to go to a house that had an electric stove, I would cook out on my porch every day with it until I got my gas pig in. If I had to live without gas for whatever reason, I would own one of these and I would make eggs and bacon in the morning on the weekend out on the patio with my family. It is as good almost from a performance standpoint as my very expensive gas range in my kitchen. It is fantastic, and it's $100 on average cost. Sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes a little lower. It is designed to take the little small bottles, or you can get an adapter where it takes a great big grill tank. Its limitation: if you're using the little green Coleman, size 1 pound cans, it works fine if you use one of the 2 burners. If you run both, it will take about 5 minutes to completely freeze up that little 1 pound unit. It's pulling too much gas too fast. I really recommend anything that can use a grill tank, you get an adapter for it, even if you don't commonly use it, because it's so much better in an outage to have 6-8 tanks of that stuff sitting aside and it's just there. But have something, if it's the little butane ones or whatever. And I want to point something out that I shouldn't have to. All the little gas ranges are safe to use indoors. Now, running them full blast to try to heat your house, not a good idea. But my gas range in my kitchen burns propane. It has a little burner, you turn it on, and we sit there and we make stew, and it's slow cooked stew. For hours, we don't die. It's no different running something like a Camp Chef stove. It works exactly the same way. I'm sorry. The danger comes with you're attached to a tank, a bottle. There's more propensity for leaks. So you want to make sure that you don't have any leaks. Best practice is that big bottle goes outside, the hose comes through a window or something like that if you need to use it inside. But then as long as you can boil water, you're good to go. And then I forgot one of the types of coffee makers that you can get. And this is another great coffee maker for day-to-day use. It is a pour-through coffee maker. Generally, they're cone pour-throughs. I'll put a link to like a mass search where you can just see what I'm talking about, because I don't have any brands to recommend in particular. But the way these work is they use a paper filter or a permanent filter. If you're going to use a coffee maker that uses a filter, get a permanent filter. Stop wasting money and stop creating waste that you don't need to create. You put the filter in, you put the coffee in, and you pour your hot water through the cone filter, and it goes into a pot like a normal coffee pot. I would say if you're a person that's using any kind of like a pour-through filter or something like that, and you're making 10 cups of coffee at a time, get yourself an insulated carafe of some sort that you can then pour the coffee into to keep it warm. Microwaving coffee, in the words of Alton Brown, is not good eats, friends and neighbors. It really isn't. If you get one of these, and this is what I really recommend, and the reason I recommend it is I use it. I am a coffee fanatic. I drink 4 to 6 cups of coffee a day, and they're not little girly cups. They're great big manly cups like this, Delicious. These are insulated. If you look at the thickness of those walls, they're heavily insulated. And we got the big version, the 50-ounce version of this, and we had used the smaller one for a while. And the reason we got the big one is since we drink large cups of coffee. Both my wife and I use, mega cups, not these little bitty British teacup things. This makes 2 cups. And leaves a little tiny bit that's just never that good at the end, that last little bit, unless you pour it immediately. The big one makes exactly, almost perfectly, for the size cups we use, 3 full cups. So one of us gets the last cup, and whoever gets the last cup gets to make the next batch. there you go. I know this is like one of those topics a little off from what we usually talk about. Coffee is something that's very important in the lives of people. And just in an emergency situation, the little niceties, the little things that spoil us, these are the things that make us feel normal when things aren't quite normal. These are the things that make things comfortable. Being able to wake up when it was 0 degrees outside during the Great Texas Blackout, fire up the stove, throw a pot of water on it, boil the water, dump it in my French press and have a cup of coffee like it was any other day, it made putting all the shit back together that broke just a little bit easier. It really does. And I really recommend that you have not only a solution for stuff like this, but that you try it and use it before you need it. That's good advice with everything when it comes to this stuff. Again, I'll put links to everything I talked about in the video notes, which will be right down there. And if you're listening to this one on the podcast recap, it's one that you might want to pull the video up for. Take care, guys. I'll be back tomorrow.